Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap. Round 19 it was. Melbourne in Victoria, and if you didn't know where the game was being played, you only had to check the umpiring to work out that it must have been in Melbourne, because, again, it was another shitful performance by the bloody umpires, and not that it cost us a game, but it certainly didn't make it any easier, and some of the decisions in the last were pretty average. As I'm sure you'll agree, Macca, how are you, mate?
Well, one thing I disagree with you right from the word go. I think it did cost us the game, mate. We were beaten by less than a goal by that 22-man team. I mean, the one real bad turning point was we kicked 4 in a row, and in that last quarter, we come out like firing like bullets out, and they got the ball down their forward line, and they took a mark. Smith took a mark. But behind the play, Worrell's getting bloody mauled and thrown around, and it was a blatant free. There's 4 umpires out there, and not paid, nothing paid. And then later on, a little bit later, Worrell gets charged with taking the legs when you get a hip to the head. And I have seen professional cheating going on, and I think I watched it today.
Well, what I didn't see was professional kicking for goal, Macca, and you can't argue the fact that in the first half in particular, any advantage that we had was kicked away with some very, very poor set shot kicking.
Yeah, I'll totally agree with that, because I've got a little note down here. We had 3 enemies today. We had Melbourne, we had ourselves with our shooting for goal, and the 4 buffoons on the ground. So, there was a lot going against us, and we helped the problem. I agree with that. No doubt about that. We kicked straight, and we probably win the game, even in spite of the buffoons. But having said that, it isn't right that when you go over there and you're playing on a game, their home ground, a game they play all the bloody time on the MCG, where they play the bloody finals, etc., and you get treated like a rag doll. You just treated like a piece of rubbish, and that's how the umpires treated us today.
Yeah, I didn't think it was the worst umpiring I've ever seen. I thought there were some key decisions. I mean, you pointed out the Worrell one on Viney, which was just mystifying. Like, it was just mystifying. There was just no explanation that the umpire could have offered. I think he called it below the knees, and I mean, for goodness sake.
That's what he called it.
Yeah, but look, the thing of it was, we should have been in a far better position than we were, Mac. We had one more scoring shot than them for the game. The shots that we missed were entirely gettable, and 50% of those go through, and we win the game by 2 or 3. So, it was an interesting game, because you felt like at any moment Melbourne were going to break the game open. They scored in bursts, Melbourne, and it looked like they had the thing under control. But to our credit, we didn't go away. And, isn't it fascinating, Mac, that when you actually dispense with the kicking down the line and the holding the ball in, and you actually start to try and run, which is what we did in the last quarter, all of a sudden it puts the wind up people. And people ask, how come Collingwood always come over the line in the last quarter? It's because they run. It's because they play attacking, aggressive football. And I haven't seen us play that way like we did in the last quarter for maybe 6 weeks. And by God, it makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're 100% right, Peter. I've also got that note down here as well. That too many times we were very pedantic and just going down the line, whereas when we just took them on, they panicked just like any other team panics, and we got 2 or 3 goals from their panicking.
Look, the thing of it is, it's not only the panicking, Mac. It's the fact that it's basic football. You catch the opposition out of position. You get more one-on-ones, you get a more open forward line, you get more opportunities. That's the way Collingwood are winning games, because they will take the game on, they will run in waves, They will hit up the options when they're offered, and they will make themselves difficult to play against, whether they're 10 goals up or 10 goals down. And as Andaluz in the chat says, it creates pressure. And that's exactly what we did in the last quarter. And look what happened. We got ourselves back in the game. And if it weren't for a couple of momentum killers during the last 10 minutes or so, who knows what might have happened. And it just annoys me that we haven't been playing that way for a good couple of weeks.
Well, it's very hard to argue with that, mate, because you're right. There are two Crow sides. There's one that when they play that really daring, attractive football, very much like Collingwood do, to just playing on at all costs, looking for players, and all players running rather than but stationary, waiting for it. It makes a total big difference, and that side is a very good side when we play like that. When we are more like calling for it in packs and all the rest of it, well, we just become just another one of those teams that won't get into the finals.
Yeah, no, look, so, it begs the question, is it chicken or the egg, Mako? Is it the personnel in there that forces the team to play that slow, stodgy game? Or is it the personnel in there that create more opportunities with a bit more ball movement? Which one is it?
I can't answer that because we don't have access to what they're being told by the coach. But for some reason, I don't know. I really don't know because. Yeah, I would think that the coach would want us to play the more daring style of football. You'd think so.
I don't think so.
You don't reckon?
No, I don't think so. It was evident last week against GWS that we wanted to play a closed-in style of game plan. And I think we've been, because of the fact that we've played fairly one-pace midfields, particularly since the break, since the Collingwood game, I think that actually forces us to play a more contested style of game. And when you start putting a couple of runners in there, like today, we had a bit of Rankin, we had Harry in there for a bit, but it was more the ball movement. It was the willingness to move the ball on, that made the difference. So I don't know. I think it was a clear directive in the last quarter to open the game up, and it just makes me wonder why we don't play like that all the time, because whenever we do, we tend to be successful.
Yeah, actually, you do raise one very good point there, Fian. That's about the structure in the midfield. At times there we had, I would say, the slowest midfield in the competition when we had Sloane, Crouch, and I can't remember who else might have been there, but
Dawson.
And I thought Dawson, and I thought to myself, there's not 1 ounce of pace in that midfield there, and you're quite right. That does dictate the way you play. Whereas once Schonberg did a couple of nice clearances and like running at pace, and it makes a totally different aspect of the forward line. They can run all over the place in all different directions when it's done like that.
Well, it's more than just at centre bounce attendances. I mean, we look at CBAs to get an idea of who is in the middle at any given time, but what you get when you get Sloane, Crouch and Dawson in playing in the middle is that you don't get any service in transition. You don't get any spread. Matthew Crouch today, and we'll go into this in more detail in a minute, but Matthew Crouch had 22 possessions. I reckon about 19 of them were at the feet of the contest. He didn't get a lot on the outside. He doesn't offer anything on transition. Roy Sloane, much the same. Just can't get to enough contests, although I thought he was quite good in the last quarter, getting back in defence. But when we play Harry, or even Jackson Haitley when he came on, when Rankin went up through the midfield, all of a sudden we've got a bit of movement through the corridor, through the middle, and it makes a world of difference. So you're 100% right, Mac. It's the makeup of the midfield has a direct impact on the style of game that we play, And when we have those slow one-pace midfielders in, we've got no choice but to play down the line and try to play contested ball.
Yeah, and when I said to you off air, Crouch played well. That was partly baiting you, but I know you.
Just to start it off on a good note.
Yeah, just to get you just live and nuts for the show, mate.
Yeah.
But I will give him one thing. He is good at getting his hands on the ball in the centre. It is a pity that he doesn't have the rest of the game.
He got torched in the centre.
Oh, I thought he got his hands on the ball a reasonable amount. But having said that, he's not. Look, he won't be playing anymore. Le'll be back next week and he'll be out again. But yeah, look, unfortunately, the game has passed him by.
So, which begs the question: why was he played, Mac?
Well, I can only think that they thought he would get out, shoot some handballs out in the middle. That's the only thing I can think. There's no other logic to it because he's not, as you said, he doesn't get the ball very, very much around the ground at all. So it can only be for allegedly trying to get win the contest at centre bounces and other contests.
Yeah. Like predominantly he was on Jack Viney. You'd say that's correct?
Well, I don't think Jack Viney knew it. He wasn't close enough.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they both had similar centre clearances, but the difference is that Matty, and this is exactly what I'm getting at, Matty Crouch gave us 150-odd metres gained, and Jack Viney gave Melbourne 520 metres gained. So you would class Jack Viney as an inside ball winner, and yet Jack Viney can give his team 520 metres, and that's I think that's my gripe with Matt Crouch. No one disputes that Matt Crouch can get the ball. I mean, he was getting the ball when he got dropped. You know, it's not his ability to get the ball that's ever been in question. The fact is that it's what he does and where he gets the ball and what he offers us, both on transition and defensively. And defensively, he was nowhere, and on transition, he was nowhere. So anyway.
You can't argue against any of it.
No. Look, before we get all the way into it, Macca, let's say hello to everyone who's joined us on Discord and YouTube. We've got a nice lineup there in the audience on Discord, so any of you that want to have your say, you know the drill, put your hand up and we'll get you on. And welcome to, we got 50 odd at the moment on YouTube listening live, so thanks to everyone who's listening on both those platforms. And don't forget your comments come up on screen and we can see them all. So those on YouTube, get into it on the chat there because we can see everything and we can respond because we're live, Macca. We're live.
Yeah, well, we felt half dead after the loss, but we're alive yet.
All right. Okay. So why don't we, if I can just find what I'm doing here, why don't we get into the weekend's results, mate? Just to give you, just to give you your moment in the sun.
I'll keep it quick, mate.
Keep it quick? Hang on. Just keep it slow at the moment while I get myself organised. Alrighty. So on Friday night, we had the Bulldogs getting up by 41 points over Essendon. Essendon looked to be, their last gasp seemed to be our match, and then they've fallen away quite dramatically since then, and the Bulldogs on Marvel won pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I was really pissed off by the fact we lost Essendon by the way that Essendon played against the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs far too good for them. It was, the first quarter was a boring safety first quarter where no side wanted to do too much. In fact, Essendon were 2 goals up at quarter time, but through Bontempelli, Liberatore and Smith, which is a massive midfield when you look at it, they got up and running and they just kicked 12 goals to 4 from that point on. The Dogs, they firmed up their final chances and, in reverse, Essendon took a dive. I must mention Bontempelli. He is an absolute star. He's possibly the best player in the comp at the moment.
Or he's probably the only one I reckon that's going to give Dacos a run for his money in the Brownlow, I'd say.
Yep, well, he's been knocking up some threes, that's for sure.
Yeah. On Saturday, we had Hawthorn learning the hard way that you don't give up playing with 5 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go. And Richmond just ran over the top of them, winning by a point in the end. It was a pretty good game in that last quarter.
Yeah, look, I was sorry for Hawthorn because I thought they had Richmond by the Canaddy-whackers. I thought they'd
By the what?
Canaddy-whackers, the polite way of saying knackers, mate.
When have you been polite?
Well, only that second. No, yeah, they were 5 goals up at three-quarter time, the Hawks, and I thought they played pretty well. And I thought they'd go on to win it, but Richmond turned it on in the last quarter, and Hawks have been relying on their, what I would call a B-grade midfield of Newcombe, Warple and Nash, but they'd all played well. But that was it. They didn't play too well in the last quarter. Richmond ran all over them, and they got up. They hit the front with 63 seconds to go, and in spite of Sicily's efforts down back, they got up. And
wasn't Sicily's efforts, it was the bloody umpire's efforts. I tell you what, you talk about an umpiring fraternity trying to get the team over the line. Oh my God.
Well, they could have put on black and yellow. I did actually say it, Mrs. Baker, they should be putting on black and yellow Guernsey.
No, brown and yellow. They tried to get Hawthorn. They gave Sicily three frees in a row that were just not there.
Well, that last quarter, I think they switched sides, mate.
Oh, it was horrible. Anyway, on the next game on the Saturday was Carlton and West Coast. Carlton doing the business by 71 points. Charlie Curnow getting a bag full and staking a claim for the Coleman.
Yeah, look, on paper, you'd say it was good and all the rest, but I think deep down they'd have to be very disappointed. They were 83 points up close to half time, and they only end up winning by 71. And West Coast outscored them by 2 goals in the second half. I mean, the highlight was Curnow kicking his 10 goals, but the downside for Carlton, they also got 3 more injuries during the game. But I would say that in a competition where you need every bit of percentage you can get, they'd have to be disappointed with their second half effort.
Yeah, the percentage has improved, but it's not by any means great. So you're right, Mac. They missed an opportunity there to really mine some percentage, but who cares? It's Carlton. Brisbane getting up by 11 points at the Gabba over Geelong, 64-53. They looked pretty good early, and then Geelong fought back as they do, and Brisbane, I think, did well to hang on and win that one.
Yeah, that's a very good brief summary of the game, actually. I was delighted with the result because I hate Geelong. I really do. But actually, it was Brisbane's midfield, which Dunkley, he's good. I mean, he comes straight back in there and he just keeps getting the ball or tackling or whatever. Lockie Newell had a good game. McCluggage, he did a pretty good job as well. They won 49. I think I'm right. Yeah, 49-22 at the stoppages, Fiend. I mean, that's an outstanding winning.
It's a toweling up, isn't it?
Yeah, and Geelong did mount a challenge late, as you said, and for one horrible moment I thought they might get up, but thank God, Brisbane hung on to win by whatever they did, 13 points, 11 points, whatever it was.
11 points.
11 points. What was sad was Ashcroft's injury. He's been, look, he's a clean-cut looking lad. He plays such good football, and what a horrible thing to happen to him.
Well, horrible for him, obviously, but also horrible for Brisbane because he's been playing some good footy and been integral in their rotation. So, yeah, it puts a bit of a chink in their finals aspirations, I would have thought. Yeah,
it does. I think it does.
Then we had you'd probably say arguably the match of the season so far, Port v Collingwood. Port up by, 17 points at three-quarter time.
Yep.
And everybody knew that Collingwood was going to get up And they did.
Well,
By 2 points in the end, Collingwood, with, you have to say, some very, very clutch goal kicking.
yeah. It was actually, I've got to say, it's one of the best contested games I've seen for a very, very long time, Fiend. I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed the game. I really did. And much as I hate Port Adelaide, at times I was even oscillating, occasionally barracking for them to wash my mouth out with soap and go barrack for Collingwood. But, it just was one of those games, it just was going backwards and forwards. I thought, Butters and Rosie outstanding for Port, and Drew was doing a really good job on Dacos, and as you said, 17 points up. But as you know, you just know Collingwood are going to come. Port still did have one chance. Collingwood at the front with 3 minutes to go, but Port had one chance, and Farrell dropped a chest mark inside the 50 in the last couple of minutes. Now he's a beautiful kick, and he probably would have kicked the goal. So, yeah, very costly drop.
Yep, but again, it goes to show you have to keep playing against Collingwood. You have to keep playing, but you also have to understand with Collingwood, and it'll be interesting to see whoever gets them in the finals. It'll be interesting to see how they defend, because you cannot give Collingwood the corridor. You cannot give them the corridor, and too many times in last quarter blitzes that they put on, it's all corridor. And you need a coach needs to work this out and just not give them the corridor. Let them run around the outside. If they get you around the outside, then good on them. They've done well. But you give them the corridor, and they'll just cut you up really quickly. They'll score so quickly. That's the thing. They score really quickly when they're on a roll.
Do they ever? And look, even their no-name brands do very, very well. They play the game as the team is supposed to play it. They go to the places where the team wants them to go to. They just do it right.
Yeah, but again, it shows you what confidence will do. You talk about their role players being good players. That's because as a team, they're playing with so much confidence and belief, and it does lift those second-tier players to play to their maximum capacity, and to, take the ball one grab, and to pull off the good kick, and to, run that little bit harder, and all that sort of stuff. That's all about belief. And, Collingwood are just riding a wave of belief at the moment. They'll be very hard to stop.
100% agree.
And then Freo just deciding that they've had enough this season, and despite being at home, lost pretty comfortably to Sydney by 29 points, 76 to 105. Swans still got a heartbeat. Fremantle flatlined.
Yeah, it's a good summary there. It was really right at the beginning of the game. Freo gave Sydney a 6-goal start, and that's about where it finished, just under that. And they just didn't turn up for the first few minutes, Freo, and it cost them any chance in the game. And they just were chasing tail for the rest of it. And the interesting thing was they had a winning ruck and a winning on borders, but they must have been losing a lot of other positions anyhow. So, as you said, bye-bye, Freo. No finals for you.
Yeah, done and done. Done and done. And today, the Giants, after a pretty close first half, the Giants running away in the end by 40 points, and really looking like being a finals chance, to be honest with you. GWS, they're playing good footy, and the Suns couldn't go with them.
They've always had a good midfield and a reasonable forward line, but they've got a very, very good fullback in Taylor. He's outstanding. He'll be the All-Australian fullback, and switching Himmelberg back into the back lines just gives them that strong body there, can take the big mark as well. And he was outstanding today, Himmelberg. So they've that's 6 games on the trot now they've won, and they're making a good charge.
Yeah, well, they've certainly got momentum, and it makes you think, well, they're probably the best team out of the 8 at the moment, I would say.
No, they're in the 8 now. No.
Well, they're probably the best team just in the 8 now, then.
Okay.
And then after our disaster, St Kilda nearly had a disaster of their own before sneaking over the line by 8 points. I didn't watch this game, but I was watching the scores, and for a long time it looked like North were going to get them.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I was that pissed off after our game. I didn't bother watching it.
Yeah, that's right.
But I did see that they were leading by 8 points. I think it was three-quarter time, and Saints ran over them in the last quarter to win by 8. That's all we need to say.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so that takes us to the table. And Collingwood now clear in front. Port clear in second, a game ahead of Brisbane on 52 and Melbourne on 48. So those teams, Collingwood now 2 games in front. The other 3 separated by a game apiece. The Bulldogs looking at this stage the best of the rest on 40. St Kilda also on 40, still hanging in there. GWS on 40 also, and Geelong in there just sneaking up on 38 despite their loss. They are in good nick, Geelong. They've got that half a game, plus they've got a fantastic percentage. So they're looking all right. And then out of the 8, Mac. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I hope Geelong miss. Hate them.
Yeah, I'd rather them miss. And then we got Carlton also on 38 with a slightly worse percentage. And this is what you're talking about, Mac. They're both on 38 points. Carlton had the opportunity to get up on Geelong's percentage today, and they didn't.
Correct.
So there's still, 4 or 5% between them. Richmond also on 38, but with a far worse percentage. Essendon would need a fair bit going their way now on 36 points to go their way. Sydney as well, 34. You think a bridge too far. And then certainly season over for Adelaide, Gold Coast, Fremantle, Hawthorn, North Melbourne and West Coast.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter what anybody says. Our final chances are out the window.
Oh, yeah. No, we're not making it. We're not making it now, Mac. No. And, 2 key games were the Essendon and Giants games, and we failed. Had we won the Melbourne game, I think we would have been in with a lazy shot, but I don't think it would have made much difference anyway.
No. If we made it, we would have been resold out pretty quick, I think.
Resold out, you reckon?
Yeah, I think so.
You're coming up with some pretty good sayings tonight.
Oh, there'll be more.
All right, so as mentioned earlier, we've got a nice little audience in the Discord studio, so if any of you guys want to have your say, feel free. But in the meantime, Macca, let's get into our game. And as we mentioned, 14-13-97 Melbourne, 4 points in the end over Adelaide, 13-15-93. Many would say an honourable loss. How do you see that?
Definitely. Really, I'd give it a better than honourable loss, because to me it was a moral win, in my opinion. But the results don't show that. But
there's no such fucking thing, Macca.
No, I invented that one too.
A moral win. There's no such thing as a moral win.
Well, a moral
There's no morality in football.
No, there isn't. But if there was, but I just think we played well enough to win the game. That's what I'm saying. And through circumstances that we partly contributed to, and the other 4 people contributed to, that's why we got resolved. Yeah.
So we had a couple of late ins, Mac. Luton Nankervis made his debut, coming in for a sick someone. I think it was McHenry.
McHenry and Parnell, they both had the flu.
Yeah, and Haley on the bench as a sub.
And Nankervis into the side.
That's what I said.
And you were right.
Just while we're at it, I am taking applications for a sidekick for the 2024 season. So because I think Macca's losing his mind.
Like, I'm not just warning anybody who applies it. You actually have to pay him to be on the show.
And so you should too. The point I guess I'm making about Nankervis is that, again, it took a bloody sickness to give someone a debut. And again, just as Josh Worrell has done in the past and a few others, Luke Nankervis did not disappoint.
Well, I thought he played very well for a bloke playing his first game, Fiend. You know, he didn't lack any confidence, and I thought he went in hard for the ball. I thought he used the ball relatively well when he had it. I think we all thought he was definitely going to make the grade in the long term and probably next year. But gee, I think it's a little bit hard to keep him out after that.
Well, he certainly played well, I thought. A couple of little errors. Cosy Pickett did him for a goal at one stage, and one other that I can't quite think of at the moment. But by and large, he was solid. He didn't look flustered. He didn't panic with the ball. He looked composed, and his disposal was pretty good. So a very good debut. We also had Harry Schoenberg back into the team, Mac. And after a slowish start, I thought his second half was pretty good.
Yeah, he wasn't too good early, but he sort of built his game, and I thought he was going best at the end. Yeah, I think. Look, if Harry can play like that every week, I'd be happy with Harry.
Yep. My thoughts about Harry. I think there's a lot to work with there. He needs to get fitter. He needs to just strip that puppy fat. Like he's fitter than last year, but he needs to be fitter again. He needs to put the same amount of work in this off season that he did last. If he's going to become a bona fide AFL midfielder, he needs to get those skin folds down, in my opinion. But he looked a little bit more composed, and we saw some of those sharp gives that he was known for in his debut season. So I thought it was quite encouraging, actually.
Yeah, as it said in the chat, that at least he showed some speed coming out of the midfield, and that is always was one of his assets. I agree with you that he could just tone up a little bit. There's a little bit of puppy fat still there, and if he could get himself to work like a Sloan or one of those does, and become super fit crazy in terms of making his body the very best it could be, he could be a very good player.
Yep. And we'll spend a little minute just talking about Matt Crouch, because I thought, look, they've obviously brought in Matt Crouch as a like for Laird in terms of being a coalface distributor, and in that sense he didn't do a bad job. Didn't quite get as many disposals as what would be used to from a Rory Laird, for example. But he did get, a few contested possessions and I think he got 7 clearances. We'll have a look at that in a minute. So in terms of his inside work, I mean, we got what we expected to get. But as I mentioned at the start of the show, we get nothing from him once the ball's in the open field. And that's where I felt that Melbourne got more value from blokes like Viney, because they do more than just do the stoppage work. They actually get out in the open field and make themselves dangerous.
Yeah, I love Viney as a player. He's as hard as a cat's head, and he goes in 100%, as you say, but he keeps working away all game. He's a good player, Viney.
Yeah, well, I was talking about Crouch.
I know, but having said that, that's the difference. Crouch doesn't do that.
Just applications at aflcrowcast.com.
Well, please somebody apply, then I can go. We're coming back to the situation though. But what I was saying, I quoted what Viney does. That's what he does in comparison against Crouch, because Crouch works probably as hard as Viney does in the centre, but then that's it.
He doesn't work hard around the ground. It was exactly the point. And you're not a midfielder if you don't do more. Like, the football for a midfielder is more than just stoppage work. You know, he doesn't. I didn't see him sprinting. I didn't see him running to make positions. I saw him a lot jogging. You know, just yeah. And he doesn't do anything by foot. It doesn't do anything by foot. At least in his good years of 2016, 2017, we were getting some good angular kicks from him. He kicked his 25-metre passes, but they'd be constructive. But as he's slowed down and been gobbled up by the pace of the game, it just doesn't offer anything. I mean, you could put anyone in at the feet of Rob all day, and they'll get half a dozen clearances, Mac.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, so why didn't we put Haitley in there? Why did we bother playing Crouch?
Well, as a non-selector, I can't really answer it, but I just don't know why. But
I mean, you're a Crouch supporter, but you agree with that, wouldn't you?
I'm not really a Crouch supporter. What I can say about Crouch is that he's not bad in the middle, and that's it, full stop. That's where it stops, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think his work in the centre wasn't too bad. But where he got shown up, you got guys like Petrarca attend to the centre, but the next minute you see Petrarca in the forward pocket kicking a goal. I mean, it is a massive difference, massive. And another thing too is that somebody posted up further in chat with, I don't know whether it's true or not, the Crouch has been told he's going to get a contract next year. Well, if that is the case, I think it's even worse actually playing him then.
Well, we're well known for playing players and then delisting them at the end of the season. We did it with Richie Douglas. We did it with James Rowe last year. I mean, we do it all the time.
Well, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Surely you play the future.
No, I agree with you 100%, and that's that makes me wonder where Jack Haitley sits in terms of his future. I would have had Jack Haitley in a heartbeat. He's been playing pretty well in the SANFL, and if they just wanted someone to do Rory Laird's job, then Jack Haitley would have done it just as nicely as Matty Crouch and probably given us a little bit more as well. I didn't think that Haitley played too bad when he came on as a sub, and he's not really the type that you would expect to do well in that role because he's not dynamic. So, you sort of think, he takes a little while to work into the game, but he actually did quite well considering the minutes that he got.
Haitley, I'm not sure what he got. How many possessions did he get playing?
I don't know. We're not there yet.
Okay. I don't remember seeing him much in the game.
We came on in the last quarter.
Yeah, I know he came in the third quarter, actually, I think. Was it third or last?
He had four handballs he had.
Yeah, I didn't see much of him, so... but having said that, he might have done a lot better if he started in the game, but he's that type of player that, he just needs work.
And these stats are wrong, because I definitely saw him tackle at least once, and the stats got him as 0 tackles, so good old AFL stats once again. But yeah, let's have a look at the team head-to-head stats, shall we? Because might be a little bit here to talk about. Disposals, 343 to 339 in Melbourne's favour. Kicking and handball ratios fairly even. Inside 50s, we ended up winning by 2. Disposal efficiency, we were far better than Melbourne, 75 to 65. Efficiency inside 50, well, they should do that on goals because we had equal number of shots to Melbourne, but obviously didn't convert as well. Then you get this little stat here, 21 to 12 free kicks. And I didn't think it was that sort of game, Mac, where there should have been so much of a disparity in free kicks, to be honest.
No. Given the type of game it was, you would expect it to be pretty even. It could be in favour by one team by 1 or 2, but not by 9, not by 21.
Didn't seem like that game, did it? No. Anyway, around stoppage, Gawn gave Riley a bit of a bath, 43 to 28. Also kicked a couple of goals, Maxi. Clearances, 39 to 32 in their favour. 15 to 13 at centre and 24 to 19 around stoppage. Contested possession, well, they beat us at that game, 149 to 128. I've just felt they were a bit stronger around stoppage, Mac. We got it on the outside a little bit more. I reckon a bit of that would have been in the last quarter too. 180 to 197. Turnovers about even. Marks, we marked the ball more because we had a little bit more on the outside, 89 to 78. Marks inside 50 though, 17 to 12. We looked woeful up forward in the first half. Woeful. And a lot of, I think it was partly the entries and partly the way we were moving the ball. You and I have said this time and time again, Mac. If you don't change lanes and change angles, you just kick to clumps in the forward line. And that's exactly what was happening.
Yeah, I had a couple of people and they were saying Fogarty was absolutely shit house in that most of the game, and he was. But how could he possibly do anything when the ball's at pedestrian pace, moving down it, and then kick long into a clump of players? That's not Fogarty's game. And but he still. I know people are saying he's still a worry. He didn't have a great game, but look, you're right though, Finn. We have to move that ball very, very quickly. We have to make angles. We have to move it totally differently than how we did, because when you go straight down the line and you eventually kick a bomb it in, that never works. Never works.
No, and I haven't been tracking forward 50 entries this year like last year, but it looked very much like one of our classic one possession short going into forward 50 and kicking it into that, that 30 metres out on the boundary kind of entry. You know what I mean? We didn't get any penetration. We didn't make ourselves difficult. The amount of times that Jake Lever got all over it and, they had a double up on Tex half the time and Lever was benefiting from that. It was just dumb football. And, we didn't make enough of our opportunities to switch the ball and to make the ground a bit wider.
Exactly. No, 100%. When we did that in the last quarter for those first 4 goals, well, we looked like a champion team. It just made it look so easy. But and when you do it correctly, there's no doubt about it. It does make the team look good. But unfortunately, we didn't have enough of that.
Yeah. On the plus side, our defensive work was good. 69 to 47 tackles, 13 to 1 inside 50. Again, no one could ever accuse an Adelaide. Well, rarely could an Adelaide side be accused of not trying. And this was one of those games where we played the game out. It's not about effort; it's about method, in my opinion, and personnel. And I think personnel at times puts us between a rock and a hard place in terms of how we play, and that then impacts method.
I agree with that. Losing Rankin didn't help any either.
No, we're losing Rankin in the last. I mean, we'll go through players in a minute, but I would have thought that he would have been our best, or certainly amongst our best. He was dynamic.
Best.
He was dynamic for those 3 and a bit quarters, and whilst he still didn't attend a centre bounce, Macca, he was playing a bit higher and was around stoppage a little bit, and really makes his presence felt around stoppage. He just adds something, and I just don't understand why they wouldn't, when he's up and about and he's moving well and he's causing them problems. It's exactly what Goodwin did with Cozzy Pickett. Played him in the middle for a few, got him freed up, and then pushed him forward, and Cozzy went nuts. And I just feel like that's exactly what Nick should be doing with Rankin. Just give him a little 5-minute burst every now and again in the mid. He doesn't have to have a midfielder's engine, but he's clean and he's evasive and he's quick. This is this one-dimensional thinking that our coaching group seem to have.
Well, some of our commentators today were dullards, but even they picked that up, that should be done, that Rankin should be given bursts in the middle. But it didn't seem to be obvious to everybody but the coach.
Yeah, it lacks, to me, it lacks a feel for the game. I know we've got one or two on our Discord server that like to smash out stats and all the rest of it, but you've got to have a feel for the game at times. You've got to be able to understand what's going on and what you can do to influence what's going on. And like, if we look at the individual stats, you know, the highest stats winners on the ground are Viney, Petrarca, Brayshaw and Langdon, you know, before any of our midfielders get a look in. And then it's Shuey's our highest on 23 touches. In a game like that, as your highest possession winner. Then we've got Crouch on 22, Dawson on 22, Hinge on 22. You know, we only got 20. I mean, admittedly, it was in 3 and a bit quarters, but we got 20 touches out of Isaac, 3 goals, 3. Imagine if he'd been around the ball a little bit more.
I know. We didn't maximise him. There's no doubt about that. Because I mean, the guy, he was in magical form today. So that's when when he's in that type of form. That's when you do put him in there for a little burst.
And a coach has got to have a feel for that. But you know, coaches have played the game. They understand momentum. You know, in basketball, they call it someone's got the hot hand. And when someone's got the hot hand in basketball, you bloody give them the ball. You give them the ball. Once they get hot, you give them the ball. And
Yep.
To me, that's exactly what we should be doing with Rankin. Once you see he's on, you get him around the contest. You give him as many opportunities as you possibly can. And you put the wind up the opposition because they've got to cover him, you know? So I don't understand modern AFL football in general, how they just seem to be so hesitant to make these calls. It really... I don't understand, Mac.
Well, I don't think Nix is a brave coach. I think I mean Nix he learned his football up in Sydney, and he coaches along the horse lines, where you try and make it as safe as possible rather than daring as possible, and. So, you know, sometimes you just got to go outside that area, and like when we're playing a team like Melbourne, a team like Collingwood, you really have to. You just cannot play in a standard way. You've just got to take it on, and you know, if you get beat that way, then fair enough. But because you're going to get beat if you play stock standard.
Yeah, agreed. You know, and again, if you look at the benchmark of the competition, Collingwood. You know, they don't mind mixing it around. They don't mind taking Nick Dacos out of the middle and putting him across half-back. They don't mind giving blokes runs at the ball. You know, you've got to make yourself hard to play against. And when you've got a bloke, like I think there was a period of time, might have been in the beginning of the third quarter, where Melbourne got on a bit of a run and Rankin was sitting in the forward pocket waiting for the ball to come down. And meanwhile, you know, Melbourne have kicked 2 or 3 goals, and the commentators even made the point at that point. It's like, you know, you've got Rankin sitting down there. He should be up amongst it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, Pete. No argument about that.
Yeah. So, look, not a huge amount to take from the... Oh, g'day, Scorpus. How you going? You just drop in there.
Oh yeah, you know, I just thought I'd come on every once in a while, and tonight's one of the times I've got a bit of free time. And
you heard I was taking applications to replace Macca, and you just come straight in. It's not an application; it's an audition.
I don't think I could do that, but I just thought I'd come on, have a chat here in the middle of talking about things. So yeah, it's good to be back.
I could pay you to take my job.
Oh, maybe. Hit me up after. We'll have a chat about that.
Very good. We've also got Nuz here. Let's bring Nuz in just for a minute as well, and we'll have a bit of a four-way. It's been a while.
My God. Hey, we're in trouble. We've got real intelligence amongst us.
Yeah, so now that we've rabbited on, Nuz, how you going, mate?
Good. Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yeah,
Nuz.
Great. Yeah, I'm good. Well, you know what? Not that disappointed about the result, because it means that we have to be forced to play more kids now. So, well, I hope anyway.
Well, particularly now that we've got Rankin out.
And he'll be out for. He looked like that was a bad one by the look of it.
Yeah, that season over, I think.
And be very close to it.
Yeah, can't see him coming back. Nuz, how'd you see things, mate? Give us your learned preview for your content this week.
Well, no show this week. I'm just I'm having a bit of a rest, so apologies to anyone out there. But I am releasing.
None of your listeners, none of our listeners listen to you, mate. So just get on with
it. Well, anyway, in that regard,
no, we all do. We love it.
It was the big bodies around, and I can see why the coaches brought in Crouch. I can see their thought process, but Crouch, after the first 5 minutes, which I thought he was okay, just started to do Crouch things, and the two-way running it just wasn't there. The pace, it eluded him, and obviously we know what happens with Sloan. It's just a bit of the same old. And looking at the CBAs, we had a few more kids in there, but it's hard because Melbourne are a top 3, top 4 side, so it's always going to be difficult. Brayshaw, Petrarca, and Viney, they're all seasoned bodies, aren't they? And the fact that Schonberg was probably our best midfielder on par with Dawson, I think that's phenomenal. I mean, it just proves finally, hey, you know what? Give a kid a chance and he might actually repay you. Nankervis, Cook, say no more.
Well, I've got to say a bit more because I've still got about half an hour of a show, but...
Well, you got to do it.
What do you think, Tim?
What did I think? Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with those thoughts. I think the coaches at the moment across the last couple of matches seem to be stuck in sort of... I guess what's the way of putting it? Like they're trying to juggle a whole bunch of different things that they're aiming for. Obviously, finals is one of those, winning games. And then on top of that, they're sort of trying to shuffle in these kids into the mix, give the seniors a chance. And it just seems like 1 week, one thing pulls a little bit more than another thing. 1 week, we've got a midfield mix that has, Saligo's getting more chances, Rochelle's getting more chances. And obviously, they didn't play this week. But, then we go to a different week and then it's Keys, Sloan, it's, Laird taking up all the midfield minutes. And this week, it felt like they're going, got a few issues, there's a few injuries and illnesses and things. We're gonna give a little bit out of there. We're gonna give you the Schoenberg, we're gonna bring in Cook, we'll give you a little bit, but then at the same time, they bring back Matt Crouch as well, which you look at the side that they've put out there with players like Cook and players like Nankervis, who was a late sort of in, and then you look at them also bringing in Crouch. It doesn't seem to match up. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, those two strategies. And I certainly agree with Phoenix, what you were saying earlier, that I would have thought it would make more sense to play like a Haitley, even if he's not going to be on the list for much longer, over Crouch, just to sort of see, is there something there? We know what Matt Crouch is going to bring, but Haitley, hasn't had a ton of chances.
Well, actually, last year when he played in the midfield, he actually played well until they put him on the wing, and then he tailed off. But he had a good... He had probably about 4 or 5 really good matches in a row playing as a mid.
And who did he get pushed out for, Macca? Matt Crouch.
What, last year?
Yep, got pushed out for Matt Crouch.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Crouch came into the middle, Haitley went to the wing. That was specifically to accommodate Matt Crouch, because you and I nearly got a divorce over that one.
It's pretty weird sort of setup in the SNFL a lot of the time, where there's players playing in the midfield there that are definitely not going to be getting AFL game time in those positions at all. Like Tyler Brown, as much as he's been performing okay in the SNFL, there's no way he's getting another AFL game. And you would have thought that the opportunity would be there to instead prioritise players like Berry, Saligo, Schoenberg, Haitley when they're playing in the SNFL in those roles. But it seems like we've got this, again, just weird sort of, I don't know what you'd sort of call it, like just weird thinking at that sort of level. There's been times when we've seen, even like a Billy Dowling, who was drafted probably to play mostly in midfield, playing all around the ground, but then we're playing top-up players in the middle. It's like a top-up isn't playing at AFL level. Why are they in that sort of role? Some of that thinking really boggles the mind there. And I would have thought that, if we've made the call on a player like Crouch, which seems very unlikely he's getting another contract, that you wouldn't just keep playing him even at SNFL level in the midfield, in the inside midfield. You'd find some other position for him and give game time to the players that actually have a future in the side. But, as you've talked about many times, we love the players that are getting delisted. We love them until they're delisted.
We do. I think the plan with Crouch was always that he was going to be Laird's understudy, and so for that reason they had to keep him warm and keep him in the midfield rotations in the twos. And I think, Scorpus, what you're describing is a coaching and selection committee that have painted themselves into a bit of a corner through some probably a lack of a real plan in terms of how they were going to attack the development of the younger midfielders this season. It seems to have been a little bit haphazard. They haven't used every opportunity that they could, I think, to run players through. I think Harry's been unfortunate. I think, as much as Berry's been a little bit out of form, I think, he has needed a run. You can't tell me that a lad plays 2 seasons of AFL football at a reasonable level, last year being the highest tackler in the whole competition, and then can't get a run. I don't understand that. Blokes like Nankervis, probably should have been in 3 or 4 weeks ago. There doesn't seem to have been a plan or a discernible plan that I can tell that has allowed them to rotate juniors through, give blokes rest when they need it, but also expose them in the position that they have been chosen to play, that they were drafted to play.
Yeah, certainly. Go ahead, Mako.
No, I was just going to say, somebody in the chat mentioned, and I'll ask both of you guys this. Sloan, I'm in the category that I wouldn't give a Sloan another contract. I think he's too slow, and I know he played not bad in a defensive fashion there today, but along the same line as Crouch, I know he performs better than Crouch. He's 33, I think, and I'm just interested in both what Sensible Crow and you think about whether he should get another contract.
What do you think, Scorpus?
Okay, I guess I'll head off first. Earlier in the season, I was happy to have Sloan come into the side and see what he could do after his ACL injury. You never really know how those sorts of things are going to go. So bring him into the side, having a look, no problems there. I think in the back half of the season, it's pretty clear that the game has gone past him. I know people are sort of saying, he's coming back from an injury. He has to have time to, accommodate himself to the level. But he's also 33 years old. Like, it's unlikely that even if he didn't have an ACL injury, that he'd be playing at his peak at the moment. And if you're thinking about, like, another year as a 34-year-old player, like, how many midfielders playing his role have we had at the club that have been able to play at 34 years old? Like, there's not very many. So, based on his performances, I don't think he should be getting a contract next year. And I don't think there's another role for him in the side that I'd be comfortable with him playing. Like, half forward, we have plenty of players that can rotate through there. Lots of younger kids, players like Rochelle and Pedler, who I would expect to still rotate through there. Half back has been floated, but we're stacked with players in that position. Nankervis just came in and showed that he can easily play that role without having played ever. So I don't see a role for him, and I don't want that temptation there of coaches maybe thinking, maybe we can give him a game, or he's a club legend and things like that. I think it's time for him to retire and just sort of move on to the next level for him, whether that's coaching or something else, and giving what he can give in that area.
Baxter in the chat reckons that Scott Thompson gets 50 touches a week at playing for the Only Jets. Well, Baxter, I played about 200 games on that bloody postage stamp of an oval. It's not hard to get 50 disposals on Kingswood Oval, for Christ's sakes. I've seen bloody primary school grounds that are bigger than that.
Sensible, what do you think, mate? Would you give Slade another contract?
I wouldn't. We just have enough players that have proven time and time again that if you give them a chance, they'll actually do well. I mean, Schonberg has been biding his time. Berry, as you said, is ready to go, and next year that'll be his 4th year in the system. He's clearly ready, and Sloan will be 34. And if it's good enough for Hodge to be shafted, one of the all-time greats out of his club, and who else? Zeeble to be sub. Who else? Nathan Jones. That's just top of my head, and surely there's others. Then it's good enough for Sloan, and I love Sloan. We all do. He's phenomenal. He's a great bloke and everything. He's given everything for his club, but we don't owe Sloan anything, and he's a custodian of the club, just like we're fans of the club. But we shouldn't owe him a contract. And I think in the past we've always been a bit friendly with some of our decision making and contracts, and always given one more. When we gave Sloan his contract ages ago, it was already one more year. Yes, he's playing football, but we have 40 people on the list. We're going to get more kids in. We're going to probably get, or possibly Redmond and others as well, Bailey, Williams, whoever you like, over the next period. We need to give them a shot. Rory Sloane's numbers this year are mirror image to Jackson Haley's last year. Last year, not this year. I mean, say no more. He does his job because you expect him to. He's played 250 bloody games. Of course he's going to do his job, but so are other kids. And at 34, it's going to be too late. We're going to have to rely on him to, I don't know, make his own call. He's got a couple of weeks left to decide, but are we brave enough as a club to say, hey, Rory, time's up? Are we brave enough? And I fear that we might not be.
I don't think we are, and I think part of the issue with someone like Sloan and senior players in general is that if you look at how Sloan plays, like it's not like he's getting into the wrong positions and is just constantly not playing to coaching instructions and not following the game plan. He very much is doing those things. He's doing everything that you'd expect of a player, and I'm sure at a coaching level, in between the games and everything, his reviews are, you're following all the instructions and so on, and that has to go away to selection is probably a big reason to why he's still getting the games. But that's only part of the story. You can be in the right position but still be ineffective in that position in terms of a player losing a ground ball or something like that, or being unable to stop someone transitioning or doing some fast breaks. And it's clear that Sloan can't do those things at the moment. His body is just not letting him do that. So I think the coaches have to sort of, get out of that mindset that someone is still, a super valuable contributor just because of his positioning and game sense and knowledge of the game plan, and start thinking, we need to get our junior players to the level where they're doing those same things at the same level as Sloan, but on top of that are just playing at a level that you'd expect of a 23-year-old or something who has the body to play AFL at a much higher capacity. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think the coaches will make that decision, though.
So I'm a little bit different to you guys. I would give Sloan another year.
I wouldn't.
Well, let me finish, Macca, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
This is why you're getting the sack.
Good.
I got 2 good candidates doing auditions here, in case you didn't realise. Nuds mentioned Luke Hodge, and yes, Luke did get kicked out of Hawthorn in his final years, but he did do a very good job as a quarterback for Brisbane when they were developing. And if there's one role that I think Sloan could play, it's as that sort of general in the back lines as a medium-sized defender. I think he would be quite good in that role. And if we were going to play him anywhere, I don't want him in the midfield, and I would like him to play a lot of SANFL, but I think he still has some value, unlike Matty Crouch, who can only do one thing. And that's play inside mid, and he's not dynamic. Sloan has shown in patches this year that he's still got the ability to make a difference and have an impact on the game, and so I'd give him another year on that basis.
Well, I'll talk now that you've finished, then, and I apologise for interrupting before.
Thanks. How rude.
And shocking. Absolutely disgraceful. I agree with Sensible, Crow, and with Phoenix. with Tim. Sorry, not Phoenix. Yeah, I think that Sloane. What we're seeing at the moment is not the Sloane that we used to have. Sloane has been a champion. There's no doubt about it. He's been the heart and soul of the Adelaide Footy Club for a long, long time. Who can get over that incident where he met Dangerfield and they would clashed the two Titans and Dangerfield left brawling on his back. That's what he's been to the Adelaide Footy Club. He's just been the heart and soul. But age catches up with everybody. And what we're looking at now is not the man that is capable of doing that anymore. He tries his heart out, but he hasn't got the pace. And look, he's only going to be 1 year. He's going to be a year older and a year slower. And we've got young lads looking for positions on half-back flags, on wings, on the ball, and we have to give those players a chance. Sloane, I say to Sloane, I'm not going to give you a contract, but I want you to come into the coaching box and be an assist in. You can be an assistant coach to an assistant coach, if you like, in the midfield. And I'd keep him in the club because he is.
Why? On what basis? Have you seen Rory coach? Have you?
Most coaches have got their first position. Nobody's seen them coach before either.
That's right. They don't go straight in as a line coach in the midfield.
I didn't. If you listen carefully, I didn't say he was going to be a line coach, assistant to the guy who's the line coach.
I don't want him anywhere near our coaching box.
Well, that's you, and you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine.
Yeah, I don't think he's a coach.
Sorry to interrupt. I'd probably agree that he probably should get his first coaching job somewhere other than the Crows, similar to all of our players. I've just looked up the oldest ever Adelaide Crows players because I was interested to see, we've had some champion players. How old have they played to? There's only ever been 4 players at the club to play at 34 years of age and older, those being Darren Jarman, Scott Thompson, Mark Bickley and Nigel Smart. I think Scott Thompson, most people would say that was probably a mistake.
Yep.
Some of our other champions, Mark Rasciuto, he retired at 32, Tyson Edwards, 33, Simon Goodwin, 33, Andrew McLeod, 33. So Sloane, if he plays, next year, round 1, he'd be 34. I just don't see why the club should, just give him a contract if he's not performing at the level of some of those champions, and even then they saw the need to retire that around the similar age to Sloane now, and I think Sloane fits into that similar sort of category.
Yeah, well, that's the way I see it. Fiona doesn't. There's 3 of us that do, but that doesn't mean that we're right. But that's just our opinion, Fiona. And
yeah. No. And I would certainly not play him in the midfield. I agree 100% with everything that you guys have said about his role in the midfield, 100%. But we have seen at times during the year, in 1 or 2 quarters, where he has had a direct influence on the game. And I feel like, depending on how he gets through another pre-season, he could have some value there, but I don't want him. And I tell you what, he would be more valuable off half back than Brodie Smith, Macca.
Well, look, that's probably the only place that you would be able to play him next year.
Well, if you'd listen, that's exactly what I said.
Well, I said I still stick by the fact I wouldn't play him. But if you're going to play him, that is the only place you could put him. You can't put him in the midfield. So I don't see what I said wrong there. But it makes you happy. It makes you happy to put me down.
Here we go.
What I'm about to say is that they're going to give Walker a contract, and I am of the opinion of the other, and I do agree with the other guys. I don't think the club's got the balls to give Sloane his marching orders. I think Walker will say, I want my mate to get a contract too. That shouldn't influence it, but it probably will. And I think that Sloane will get another contract, but I wouldn't give it to him.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think it would be a very tough call that the club isn't prone to making. I can't remember the last time we made a call on well, probably Richard Douglas was the last call that we made on a player's career.
Yeah, and that was probably 1 year too late.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And same with Tom, one year too late there too. So, and it's going to be, if Sloan goes on it, it'll be 1 year too late. That's just my opinion. I could be proven wrong, but
and the problem that we had with Tomo and Douglas is that not only did they get an extra year on a contract, but they continued to get played in key roles. Like Douglas and Thompson both played lots of A-grade midfield minutes right up until they got cut. There's no such thing at the Adelaide Crows of bowing out gracefully, unless you're Matty Wright. So, and Sloan himself has said he'll play until they cut him. So, if they are going to play him as a midfielder until they decide to delist him, then it has to happen this year.
Well, that's factual. I don't think anybody that's currently talking up here on the panel would differ from that. And I don't even think there'd be anybody out there listening who would probably think that Sloan should be in the midfield next year. But as I said, that he's very limited where he can go to, and being a person that doesn't have pace anymore, he's got no pace, it does limit where he can go to. And as I said, we've got a lot of young lads that and which Nankervis showed today. You give a young lad a go, and he'll give you something back. And if you keep playing him regularly, you'll get a lot more back from him. And if they come, and Sloan just holds another person up.
Nuz, another bloke that I am hot on is Brodie Smith. What are your thoughts on Smithers?
Well, it's the dump kicking, isn't it? It's just not conducive to the way that we need to play and the style of play that we're trying to do. But just on Sloan, I was just thinking just then, what's one thing that kills us every time we play against a reasonable midfield? What is it in that midfield? One trait. Speed.
Well,
what's the
speed,
one thing
isn't
that Sloan doesn't have? And what's the one thing that Sloan doesn't have? It's speed. So it's just can't be Sloan in midfield, and I'm just scared that if we sign him on for another year, that he'll have too much to say, all too chummy, like we've discussed. So you know what? If he can accept maybe a sub role, I'm not that. I'm indifferent to it. But just to go on with Smith, like you asked, he's on for another year as well. Is he going to be playing one more year? Because he's going to stifle the development of people like Nankervis, and Cook's been tried up a half-back flank as well, and Parnell possibly. We might Redmond or Williams as well. So where's Smith going to fit into all that? Is he going to push out another kid? So we've already got these awkward questions lined up years after years. I don't know. It's very concerning. I'm almost more concerned that we think that Smith's good internally when the reality is he's just an average player.
I think
what's funny is
yeah.
Well,
Scholars, I think we're going to say the same thing.
I'm not sure we'll say the same thing. I found there was some person on Twitter that was just posting some more advanced champion data stats in this big spreadsheet over the last couple of years. I think it had the first half of this season. Apologies to the person on Twitter who I don't remember who they are, so I've just torched that person. And it was interesting because it had kick data that had whether a kick ended up being to a contest, was retained, or was a turnover. So better than the sort of standard kick efficiency stats, actually telling you kick it, which one of those three outcomes does it have? And I was interested. I sorted by 2023, this year, first half of the year up to about round 13, looked at all of our players, and Brodie Smith was the second worst player on the list in terms of kicks going to retained so another Adelaide player getting a kick directly from Smith. Second worst, Josh Worrell was the worst, just by a little bit. Not as many kicks in the data. I think he'd only played like a couple of games at that point, but obviously Smith had played throughout the whole season. And it was notable how that he was also the highest percentage of kicking to a contest. So everything that you've been saying on the cast over the last years, don't know if it's just this year, previous years, where
Forever.
Brodie Smith kicks to a contest and is an ineffective kick because we rarely keep the ball when he does that, is just shown by these stats that I wish they would more publicly produce stats, because they're great stats. A lot of our midfielders are sort of more around I think it was like 50 to 55% retained percentage from a kick. Brodie Smith was down just under 40%, which is quite a discrepancy. And the best player for us was surprisingly Max Michelani. At, I think 65% of his kicks were retained by the Crows, which is very high. So, you know, if the Crows have this data internally, like they'd have a full champion data subscription, surely they'd have these numbers. Surely someone internally is giving them the information that Brodie Smith's kicks are not retained, and that's not good.
Anyway. There's a bloke on our chat, Heafy, who doesn't believe in the eye test. But we've made that observation about Brodie Smith for about 5 years without any stats to back it up, and it's been bloody plain as a nose on your face. So, you know, the eye test, if you actually know what you're looking at, actually stacks up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
of course.
He's the master of the dump kick, the master of it.
Always has been.
Yeah, I mean, Brodie Smith, he didn't have a high turnover percentage, so it's not like a lot of his kicks just go straight to an opposition player. But it's very concerning how often it just goes to a contest, and especially a lot of those contests we didn't end up getting the possession from. So, you know, Hinge was notably higher, Wayne Miller are notably higher in terms of their, you know, how effective their kicks were, and that's what you'd expect from a half-back. Like, you'd want your kicks to be retained by the next player. That's how you set up chains. That's how you transition inside the, you know, forward 50. If you're getting a player who's mostly kicking around that defensive 50 line, and, you know, less than half the time it's being retained by us, it's just, you know, our defenders are just getting torched there because the ball's probably going to come straight back in.
Yeah, Andalou says, does it include kick-ins? No, it doesn't. And not only that, you know, any bloke kicking in worth his salt these days would not be kicking to a contest more than probably 30% of the time, really, these days, although we seem to do it a lot. Look, the other one that we've got to discuss, I think, is Lockie Murphy. Tries his guts out, got us a goal, all the rest of it. But again, like no class or composure, in my opinion.
He's an interesting player because I don't think there's any player more courageous than Murphy. I think he's got courage to burn. But also, you need two things in football. You need courage and ability. And look, he has days where he looks like he's got ability, and then he's got days where he looks like he can't play. So he's a bit of an enigma. As I said, you can't knock him for courage, but you can knock him for contribution. So I don't know what the other guys think.
Yeah, Nuz, what are your thoughts? My thoughts have always been that Murphy has actually always looked best up at the contest.
Well, that's where he was in form first half of the season, and he was doing that, and now he's kind of lost his way a bit. I'm not sure if there's something's changed, or he's just a bit tired or cramping or late in the season, but he's a seasoned campaigner. He shouldn't be, you know, going out of form as the season goes on. He should be the ones, you know, leading from the front. Yeah, it's just something's a bit off about his game at the moment, isn't it? Did you guys see that contest on the outer wing where it got set up for a goal? Basically, it was in the first quarter, I think, and Murphy's opponent directly got a goal, or, you know, this is passage of play, kick, then goal. All started from Murphy's poor defensive checking, and really poor. Like, Murphy just didn't run with him.
I remember.
I'm not sure if you've...
Yeah. Like, he stopped, and then the player went like around the back on the outside onto the boundary, ran a bit forward, and then was on the receiving end, and Murphy didn't follow at all. I think is that the one you're referring to?
Yes. I think that he got a little bit injured just before that, but that those kind of things are happening and creeping more and more into his game. And the question always comes back to him, you know, to everyone: is he going to be on the list and, you know, in the best 22 when we're top 4, top 3? When you see a player like Nankervis or Michaelaney or these X Factor tops, even Thilthorpe, who's down at the moment, you can see something in their game, you know, because we've all been watching footy for 30 years, and you'd be like, that's going to win him, that's going to win the game, blah, blah, blah. And there's something about Murphy's game that's just lacking. It's just courage, but nothing else.
Class that's lacking.
Wise.
Yeah,
it's class that's lacking. It's not a classy footballer. No, he's the same as Ned McHenry. He's a trier. He'll give you 1,000% effort every week. He'll never leave anything in the sheds. But he's not got great skills under pressure. He doesn't hit the scoreboard often enough, although he kicked a goal today. And he's again one of those see ball get ball types. So he's quite good around stoppage situations. But in general play, more often than not, he's in the wrong position because you see him flying for marks where he should be staying down and waiting for a crumb. You see him out of position, and like you said, defensively, he can get found out.
He seems to be a bit of a, I don't know what you'd call, what you describe his player as, but he's someone that both does and doesn't have good football IQ. And by that I mean when we're sort of setting up play, like it's a stoppage or something, Murphy is often in a good position. Like when he's in the midfield, and as you were talking about, he has this set play where he sort of sits behind the contest and then he runs through to get the clearance. And a lot of the time he gets the clearance is from that exact play. And you see him in the forward line. He's often flying for marks, the thing that we've always complained about. But you're not going to fly for marks if the ball's not going near you. So in those circumstances, it seems like he's a little bit of a robot. And I'm sure this is why he gets selected as well. Similar to Sloan, he knows the game plan, the positions that he has to be in at certain times. He gets himself in those positions, and then he has his very limited impact around that sort of zone. And I was watching him pretty closely today because I'd selected him in the Big Footy goal kicking competition. And even things like just holding shape on the outside of the contest when he was around the midfield, he does that reasonably well. But when it comes to I guess impacting in that X factor way, he just doesn't have that at all. So in those times where he's slightly caught out of position, he's totally ineffective. Which in contrast, there are some players like a McAdam or someone like that, or Rochelle, who even when they're not quite in the right position, they have more physical attributes to get into that position, whether that's speed or something else, or they have other ways to impact. And with Murphy, it's like if he's not doing exactly what the coaches have told him to do, he's just nowhere. And I think that Sensible Crow example of when he didn't run around the boundary to catch up to the Melbourne defender is exactly that encompassed. He had his one job, which he was in the right position to stop the play, and then job done. So he sort of switches off. He's like, okay, that's me done. But the other player had much more X factor and dynamism and did something a little bit unusual, ran around a little bit, and they got a goal out of it. And yeah, I agree with Sensible that I don't think he's a player that we can carry to a top 4 ladder position. I just don't think players who are that robotic in that sort of forward-ish position should be in the side. You need a lot more ability to do multiple different roles in a better way than him, unfortunately. But his courage and things like that, you really can't criticize that. He's a very, very courageous player, and just throws himself at contests and stuff, which I'd love to see maybe a Darcy Fogarty with some of a bit more of those attributes at the moment. But unfortunately, we've got Fogarty with some of the X Factor stuff, and Murphy with more of the throwing himself at things stuff. So, unfortunate.
So the
I'll
other
make a
person
point on
that... Oh, go on, Naz.
Sorry, just on that, because there's a player playing for Melbourne, right? And we were linked to him for 2 years running, and he couldn't get a game for Melbourne, and he would fit the Murphy role or McHenry role to a T and get goals. Played for Melbourne today. Do you know who it is?
Alex Neil-Bullen?
No, it wasn't him.
No.
Smith?
Yeah,
We've been linked to him the past 2 off seasons, and we didn't get him. One of my main gripes has always been with this club is just that extra 10% of creativity you need during list management and draft time to get you over the line. We can all do our job to 90%. Or even 100%, I should say, but it's that little bit extra, that strange kind of reasoning and creativity and thought process that we need in such a tight environment like AFL or any professional sport that you need to get over the line. We could have had a chance to get Cade Chandler for literally nothing. And for years I've been saying, he's got something. He's very good. I saw him play as a junior. He will be better than Murphy and McHenry, but we kept McHenry and Murphy on the list, steady as she goes. Barty Magic's brought it up before, that sunk cost fallacy. Oh, they've already played 50 games at the club. Let's just shovel another 50 into them. That kind of outside thinking we really lack. We've many examples in the past. Re-signing Himmelberg for too long, not getting pick 5 for Connor Rosie. Example,
Oh.
getting rid of the crowd
Yeah.
boys. Every year there seems to be something that's just, it pisses me off. Anyway,
Nuds, in the finance game and investments, there's this thing called hugging benchmarks, and I feel like our list management team are a bit like that when it comes to the investment in players, right? They are happy to hug benchmarks because in doing so you never get too much above the benchmark, but you never get too much below the benchmark either. So it's a risk-averse strategy, right? The bloke that used to fly under the radar for the Crows, who was a massive reason for our 90s and early 2000s success, was Alan Stewart. His ability to be able to spot talent and to be able to make calls on players. I think he was integral in us picking up Kane Johnson, for example. Like, you need to have something, and it's all very well and good to have your talent list and to look at to do all the things that everyone else does. They go to all the games and they look at the under-18s champs and all that sort of stuff, and focus on bringing the South Australian kids home and do all that sort of stuff. All the things that you can go tick, 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 tick at the end of the year and, put forward a fairly good case that you've done your job. But you're 100% right, Nuz, that there's those little 1% things, those little X factor things where a bloke who is good at picking up, that understands the game and understands potential and can see things in a player that are more than just a stats sheet. They're the ones that are worth their weight in gold. And I don't believe we've had someone at the Crows like that for a long time.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. If Alan Stewart, is this the guy that was effectively pushed out of the club because he suggested that Jenkins should be traded to Brisbane for a first rounder?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There you go. I mean, so you've just summed it up to a T. I mean, so people like that are a dime a dozen. They're really, we need to respect these sort of minds, and we haven't changed our list management to a recruiting team. It's they're doing a job. And that's great. We've all got to have a job in their life, but to do more, that's what we're lacking. And until we get to that stage and make bold calls, like maybe, I don't know, dropping Smith, getting rid of Sloan, maybe sending Ogilvy to Tasmania to do their scouting job, that kind of stuff, they're just a little bit bold, maybe we can then finally take the next step. I just think we're a bit meh at the moment.
Matty Rendell had a little bit of that, I think. Sometimes he could be a bit screw loose, but Malcolm Blight could be a bit screw loose too, and he won us a couple of flags. And sometimes it takes a bit of a crazy genius, doesn't it? But Matty Rendell had some good pickups. Paddy Dangerfield probably the jewel in his crown. But you're right. Things like positioning ourselves to get Connor Rosie in that draft, where we absolutely could have. Those sorts of moves that we could have made. The Dawson trade was really good, but we had Sydney on the ropes. But then to not force a better deal in the Rankin situation when he was out of contract, and who gives up pick 5 for an out of contract small forward? Nobody. Except the Crows. That was terrible trading, in my opinion. So we don't seem to have that. I don't even know what you call it, Nuz. What do you call it?
You know which club does and who does? Kinnear Beatson from Sydney.
Yeah,
he always
100%.
does things every trade and off season that just does something. Like he bid on those 2 players, the one before us and Michaelini, just because he could. The first trade that you could trade out futures, he traded out and then traded back in, like the next pick, and ended up getting a free second rounder for free. That kind of stuff. We just don't do that.
I think it flows as well into selection and the way that we're structuring this side, that even the times that we do manage to recruit players to fill holes and deficiencies, whether that's trade or at the draft, we still find ways to play the players that, as Phoenix was saying, are sort of, around the mark that we're, expecting. We've just spent countless draft picks, huge capital to get players like Rankin, Pedler, Rochelle in small forward roles. And then for some reason, we're still able to play Lockie Murphy for the majority of the season. So we're stacking the side with those sorts of players that really should be taking over from a player like Murphy, but then somehow Murphy still gets that position. And that affects the whole makeup and mix of the rest of the side, because if you suddenly got all these small forwards that you don't really need in the side, and you've got this kind of weird defensive guy that doesn't really do much, then where are we losing from? Are we losing a wing? Are we losing an inside mid rotation? And that has further flow-on effects. Then suddenly other players are stuck in the SNFL because they would normally be playing that wing role or that inside mid role that's getting sacrificed. And I thought we've seen that previously as well with David McKay. We tried so many times to had all these outside players, these wings. We'd draft a Wayne Miller, we'd bring in a Paul Seedsman, and we'd start dotting them around in our side. We'd play some of them at half back, we'd try Miller a forward, we'd play Seedsman in all sorts of different positions, and McKay's still in the side. We had it's like our recruiters had they'd sort of gone away from the coaches. They'd gone, the coaches keep playing these players, but I think we can upgrade them. And then they attempt an upgrade, and then the upgrade doesn't really go as planned. I mean, how many times have we recruited midfielders like Sam Berry to bring them into the AFL side and play them as a small forward? Like those things have to also be fixed alongside our list management and recruiting if we're going to get all these players playing to their peak and their potential and in the positions that they're supposed to be playing.
And Tim, that's what I was saying before about painting themselves into a corner with their selection policies. And it's criminal that a team on the rebuild like we are, with so many young players, could have, what was it before this week? I think we had the third lowest squad rotation in terms of selections for the year. We'd only played 31 or 32 players for the year. To me, that's horrific.
But factual.
It's not. It's certainly not ideal, and there's certainly some rotations and squad management things that they seem very reactive with some of those areas. Like, we start winning a few games, a player who had like 3 or 4 games that were poor in a row suddenly has a slightly better than average game, and that locks them into the side for a few more rounds. A kid that maybe needed a rest is sort of contributing a little bit. We try and move them into the forward line, which means bringing someone else into the middle, but we're not rotating SNFL to AFL with those decisions.
Now,
it's just,
Tim,
is Keys playing midfield or forward today?
Tim, I'm just going to get a hard ball and dish it out to Macca because he's gone a bit cold. Come on, Mac, get in there.
Well, I can't be. You talk over the top of everybody. I mean, everybody's making very good sense.
Stop whinging and just bloody say something.
Hello.
I gave you the ball. Now kick it forward to a person on a lead. Come on.
All right. Well, I want to ask the question to Sensible Crow and to Scorpus again. What we're always talking about our midfield, and we're talking about a deficiency in the midfield. And yet you look at our trading over about the last 10 years or 8 years or whatever, we don't go for bloody midfielders. We just go for everything else. And is this the year that we must go after midfielders at all costs?
Has been for the last 3, hasn't it, Nuz?
Well, yeah. Well, we just never do it. Rochelle did play quite a bit of midfield in juniors, but he's really that mid-forward kind of short man's Jake Stringer type. So the true in and under midfielder, we think to seem that they could just, be picked at number 30 or 40. But, I mean, how many premierships? We all know how premierships have won out of the midfield, and they're all picked number 4 or 12 or 10 or whatever. Pedler fits that bill. That's great, but he was a bit of a punt because of his injury history, and thank God he's actually come on. But, again, I know Pedler's struggling a little bit, but he had 2 centre bounce attendances today, so we're not doing ourselves any favours either.
And one of them was the last CBA of the day. Did you notice that?
It was pathetic.
It was the last one of the day when we were there to win a game, and all of a sudden they've chucked Pedler in, and he nearly got the clearance. But it was just really weird. It was like he hasn't been in all day, and then you put him in for the last one of the game. The hell!
If he's not fit, Rusty Rabbit's saying, then maybe give him a rest. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Pushing him, you know.
But you look at the line, every week when I look up the lineup of our side versus the opposition, I look at our midfield and I look at the midfield's opposition. You know, and they haven't got Oliver at the moment, Melbourne, but they still got Petrarca and they still got Viney. And Brayshaw goes from a wing or half back. He goes in there, and so they've still got a quality midfield. And that's the one thing I think we've pretty well, in most positions around the ground, we're pretty well covered. And the one thing that has been a deficiency, and it's been in that situation now since Dangerfield went, we just lack midfielders. I don't mean bodies, a human being there. I'm talking about quality midfielders, ones that can really make a difference to the game.
I think this goes back to what Sensible Crow was saying about how we're not doing as many aggressive and clever moves with our trading and drafting. It seems like our recruiting staff are very much of the best available talent sort of line. So we have a pick, it's pick 6, we take Josh Rochelle, who I'm not saying that's a bad pick or anything, but
it's hugging benchmark Scorpus. Yeah,
it's not a lot of midfielders around that pick. Same with like a Fisher Mackesy, a failed pick. We sort of go, oh, that draft, not heaps of top-end midfield talent, so what's a hole in our list? We'll go for a Fisher Mackesy. Whereas I think that if we're sort of looking at a draft and we've got a pick and that pick is not in the projected range of an elite midfielder, either it's the elite mids are higher up, you know, in the pick 1, 2, 3, or they're a bit further down, maybe they've got some other sort of quality that we're looking for, then we seem to, instead of trading into that zone, like taking our pick 6 and turning it into a pick 3, we're just sitting on it and going, well, we'll just take someone in that range, whoever's good. And
I'll tell you what we could have done in that year. I think it was that year. Finn Callahan was the one, Scorpus, that we should have gone hard at.
Yes.
Bona fide, genuine midfield. And yeah, like we missed that. Was that Horn Francis's year?
I think that might have been 2021.
Thilthorpe.
No, it was the year after Thilthorpe.
Yeah, that was the Jason Horn Francis draft where we took Rochelle at 6. Callahan was taken at 3.
Yeah.
I've actually got a guide for this, guys. So I'll quickly finish with this small little anecdote. We always think that we know best and have a diamond in the rough, and we've been doing it for the last 10 years and all the time with Ogilvy. He loves his diamonds in the rough. Duday. Pedler. Pedler is vouched in the 30s and 40s. Saligo. There's a whole bunch, and sometimes they come off, sometimes they don't. You can afford to do that in the picks and 30s onwards, but you can't afford to stuff around with your picks in the top 25.
Yeah,
because you have seen there's so many examples of when it goes badly, like Carlton and Melbourne, and so many times when it goes well, like Hawthorn and Richmond. Mm-hmm. So to stuff around and effectively waste a pick on Fisher Mackesy. Now, I'm not even a scout or recruiter. Mackesy in that draft year, right, he got the best and fairest for Vic Metro because he was bigger than everyone else. He had nothing else, and we picked him anyway. And nothing against Fish. I hope he's doing okay. But far out. It was just in every way the wrong call.
No, it's when you watch when you watch the under 18 highlights for Mackesy. Every mark that he took was uncontested.
Yeah, I watched every game.
Yeah, every mark that he took was uncontested. He didn't take. He wasn't that contested beast of a key position player. He was almost an intercept player. And I was shocked when they took him because, to me, if the idea was to replace Daniel Talia, then Mackesy wasn't the one. I couldn't believe it. So you're spot on the money.
But the other suggestion that was made was that we should really, and I think this is the perfect year to do it, is that the midfielders are up early in the draft. The really, really good midfielders are up early in perhaps the first 6 to 8, maybe first 6. I think we've got a draft, a first round draft, but we've got 2, if I remember rightly, we've got 2 second round drafts. Now, if surely we can use that to trade up higher and have a crack at one of the genuine good midfielders for a change. And this is the year that we must do it.
Yep. Oh,
Well,
well,
just
this is-
before you go, Nuz, I'll just put a question. I know you got to go, but I'll just put a question to everyone here. Does anyone see us ever making a move like Port did to secure those 3 lads in that one draft when they recognised that they needed to refresh their midfield, and they got rid of Wingard and a couple of others, and they got those picks off Fremantle or whatever, and got themselves in a position to get Rosie and Butters and Dersma?
Burton, I think, as well.
Not Sandro. Would you ever see the Crows? We've got stock at the moment. We've got trade stock. Do you see the Crows ever being able to or willing to be that bold to do that?
We're getting better with the actual drafting on the night and the little moves. Like we got North second rounder for really cheap, so we're getting there, but we're still behind the 8 ball compared to other top end clubs. At least we're learning, thank God, right? Otherwise we'd be coming last. But trading out players, no, we can't do that. Why would we do that? That's insane. What is this, the NBA?
Culture.
Goodness me. Riley O'Brien would be the perfect trade. There are clubs screaming for a ruckman right now. Absolutely
100%.
screaming. He has some capital. It might not be a first rounder. It doesn't need to be a first rounder. You need to be creative with it. He's got a set value of points. You could use those points, bundle them up with a second, and then get a first, or next year, whatever. Who is our ruck then? Gates, he says. Could be Grundy. You get him in. You get a cheap one. The difference with other ruckmen, like people like Lloyd Meek versus O'Brien, negligible, in my opinion. Riley O'Brien is someone who's expendable. We're not getting rid of the expendable players. And there's so many on our list. We can't afford to trade out Murphy. We can't afford to trade out these players because there's a replacement.
Look, I'd be happy to trade out Schoenberg, Berry, Rochelle, to get some class midfield. I wouldn't care who we traded out, to be honest with you. I think it's got to that point. I'm a fan of Schoenberg's. I'd be happy to get him out for a second rounder. There'd be there's not too many players I wouldn't trade. If someone wanted to give me a late first or an early second for Riley O'Brien, I would skip to the trade table. And from what I saw from Riley Thilthorpe today, you can't convince me that he's not our number one ruckman going forward anyway. So let's just pull the trigger.
I think we're definitely scarred from the years where players kept leaving us, and we've focused so much time on retaining our players and encouraging them to stay. We've given very long contracts to players like Rory Sloane as one example of a move we did to keep him at the club, that to then turn around and suddenly start going, hey, Rob, you're out. It's doesn't seem like something that we're culturally going to be doing. As much as I think I agree with all of you that it would make sense to be looking at players like that. Wayne Miller, another one I very much think has trade currency, and I would 100%. Be just sending straight to the trade table right now. But again, they're so worried about culture. We've just done this cultural rebuild of the club, that to then turn around and do a Chad Wingard to Hawthorn move on a player that has currency that's maybe loved by the playing group, it's just not going to happen. Like Ben Keys, can we move him on? Like surely some other club would want a Ben Keys in their side at the moment. A lower down club going through a rebuild, you might not get a lot for him, but that's the sort of moves that ideally we'd be making, but we just culturally we're not going to get rid of a Ben Keys or a Miller or a Riley O'Brien.
Yeah, well, then we're not going to win the flag. On that note, I'm out. See you guys.
Yes,
thanks, mate. Don't forget to not listen to Sensible Crow this week because he's not doing a cast. But the next time he does a cast, make sure you listen to him.
No, I'm re-releasing the Luke Nankervis interview from a couple of years ago, so that will be out. So have a listen.
Beautiful.
It's gold if you haven't had a listen. So on that note, see you later, guys.
Well done, mate. Take care, mate.
Catch you. Bye.
All right, so we're nearly at the 2-hour mark after that rigorous conversation, and great to have Sensible Crow on. And all jokes aside, make sure you get around his podcast whenever he puts one up. I think we're probably just about ready to finish up. I did
Well,
want
who
to
would
just
know?
talk quickly about. I just did want to talk quickly about Thilthorpe because, he had 9 of his 11 touches in the first half today, and
Yep.
I just saw a ruckman, Macca. What did you think?
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think that um, I'm not against him having little stints resting up forward, but uh, the idea of trading out Riley O'Brien is not a silly one at all. I mean, you would get a decent pick for him, and watching him today against Gorn, well, look, he tried his heart out, but it was just a non-event. He just couldn't compete with Gorn, and in terms of the future, we've still got Strawn that we could use in conjunction with Thilthorpe. And at the moment, Thilthorpe is not quite developing as quickly as I'd like to see him to do. And the best way to do it, I think, is as you suggest, is to use him a lot in the ruck, because that way he's going to be in the play all the time.
Well, I don't know whether you recall, Macca and Scorpus, but when we went on that little run in the second quarter, that was on the back of Thilthorpe being in the ruck. And as soon as O'Brien came back on and Tex came off and Thilthorpe went forward, we lost the next two centre clearances.
We did. Yeah.
And we lost momentum.
Yeah, that's why, I do think we have to be more innovative with moving players on. Last year you could see Port Adelaide. I reckon Port Adelaide was starting the rumour that Amon was going to go next year. Last year they were talking about it like about halfway through the season or before, because I think they wanted him to go so they could get a draft pick so they could have a crack at Horn Francis. So they did it to Burton. They've done it to Wingard. They're ruthless, and I think their list management is a very, very smart team indeed. They have pulled off a great coup, I reckon, and Rosie being the biggest of them. I mean, there's no way we should have been outmanoeuvred with Rosie in that particular draft. So we've got to actually be a little bit creative. Work out what we actually need, work out what we actually want, work out what we're actually lacking, and it just screams midfielder. And, you've got to give to get. And that's one thing we don't seem to understand. You do have to give to get. And so you look at who's expendable, who won't really affect our side if they're not in there. And so you take those players and Hawthorn did it. They kicked out all their, and they were legends of their club, and yet they were quite happy to move them out. To make the.
I think what gets us a little bit, Mac and Scorpus, is that at the moment players can veto trade, so we've got to find basically Victorians that want to go back home in that mix. So it can stuff you up a little bit when you want to clear the decks a little bit, but no one wants to leave. But overall, I think we're all on the same page that we need to be more aggressive. Look, let's finish off. We've got Port next week, and we're obviously going to be a little bit under the pump because we got Rankin out. We got Rochelle on the back end of a 2-week break. A little bit busted up. You would expect that if Parnell and McHenry were the two that would have been selected today had they not been ill, you would expect those two to come in.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, that's
must-haves.
not who I want. That's not who I want, Tim. But if they were picked this week, then why wouldn't they be picked next week if they're well?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So it doesn't excite, does it? It really doesn't excite. And look, I think McHenry as a sub, I'm quite happy with McHenry as a sub because he does do a little bit when he comes on. Parnell, well, he won't have to worry about mining Willie Rioli. He won't be there. But it doesn't excite me.
Yeah, I think it's crucial that from the side we did select this week, that all of Schoenberg, Nankervis, and Cook remain in the side
And
for the
Haitley.
Port game. Haitley.
I'd be
Sligo
leaving
had a pretty
Haitley
good
in
game.
and dropping Crouch.
Well, Lead will be coming back, though.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would have Sligo back in.
Yes.
Reasonable game in the SNFL, so I'd have him in. I'd have Laird in. I'd have Michelani in.
Yep.
And I guess you could make a call for Haitley as the fourth in. And then my outs would be Rankin, obviously, out. I would drop Crouch. So Crouch, Laird, like for like. I'd drop Murphy. I think he's useless. And I would manage, in inverted commas, Sloan. Manage as in dropped / retired. But that's not going to happen.
They will not drop Sloan. It'll be, if this is his last season, this will be his last showdown. They won't drop him. Let's not forget that Murray might have a bit of a calf or an Achilles, so we might need to bring in a defender, which I guess would be Michael Annie, but I don't know whether that matches up too well.
And that doesn't match up at all. You need somebody big and solid.
Yeah, you have to bring in a ball ace, which isn't like wow. Yay. But he, like for like, we need to keep our structure. And the times we played two key defenders has not worked once. Not worked, never, don't do it. So if he's out, bring in another key.
How's Keane been going?
Average.
Yep.
Just average.
The one thing about it, he has played AFL before. So, but, whether he's been going well enough to be selected, I don't know. But,
I think you'd have to shift Worrell onto Marshall. I think leave Butts on Dixon and hope he doesn't get ragdolled and make Keane your third tall.
Yeah, well, we got to be definitely on the man, and I can't see us winning it with the out that we're going to have.
Lachlan Gollant, he kicked 6 goals in the SNFL as well. Would any of you consider bringing him in?
For Fogarty?
Anyone?
Well,
I mean, he can only really come in for Fogarty. He can't come in for. I wouldn't bring him in for McAdam.
Well, what about we drop Rob, Philthorpe first ruck, Gollant in?
Makes us a bit tall. Makes us a bit tall, and you've got to Thilthorpe can't ruck all day, which means that if you're going to have Thilthorpe in a ruck option, you've got to basically bring Himmelberg in.
Just ruck Gollan in the ruck. Won't matter. Their rucks are horrible.
Bloody hell,
terrible.
Do a Finlayson.
Finlayson and Lysett, no threat whatsoever. Which means Rob is probably going to have a field day and unfortunately lock himself in for a bit. But I wouldn't be worrying too much about their output. I reckon you could ruck basically anyone.
I think you're right though. O'Brien will play, and because as you say, he should have a big edge over Lysett.
No, he hates Lysett.
Does he?
Yeah. Anyone see us winning?
I can't. I'd love to, but I can't.
Tim?
I wouldn't say I'd be more confident of beating Port than beating Collingwood or Melbourne, but yeah, I think we'd be pushing shit uphill to try and win this one. But you never know. Like, depends on the side that Port Adelaide have put out. The last couple of games haven't been. They were good against Collingwood, but they got run over. Against Carlton, they were horrible, but they played a lackluster side with a lot of changes. So it really depends on the side that they're putting out. There's definitely weak links in their team that we could be exploiting. Players like Dersma, who just hasn't come on whatsoever. Players like that, maybe would be able to do it, but I'd expect the boys to show up. So there's at least that. I wouldn't be expecting like an Essendon type start. So
Death is coming. Says, give us an answer, Tim, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. So
yes,
I don't think we'll win, but I think it's more likely than some of the other games.
I reckon Port are going to be a little bit sick and sorry after Collingwood. they freshened themselves up for that game. They dropped a couple for the Carlton match in preparation to freshen them up. And I reckon we're going to have a sneaky win this one. I really do.
Phoenix, this is one time where I'm hope that I'm wrong and you're right.
Well,
really
I'm not basing it on any logics. We all know that showdowns are always 50-50, and I just have this weird feeling that we're just going to have to, have a little sneaky win, maybe a couple of goals.
Yeah, look,
It's our showdown too, isn't it? Like our home game. So we know
it's our home game.
A bit better with the crowd. So there's that.
Yeah,
That's
we'll
in
have to put up with the bloody song.
Yeah.
All right, they all reckon I've been drinking. So anyway, Tim, it's been very nice to have you on the cast once again.
Yeah, no worries. Love jumping on every once in a while. I really should come on when we win, because it feels like I come on when we lose to have a rant.
Yeah,
but
you do.
It wasn't too ranty today. I thought we'd win. I thought we'd lose.
Mate,
you get a bit salty.
Oh well,
All right.
you know.
Well, look, thanks to everyone who's joined us on YouTube and on Discord. Appreciate all your support, of course, as always. Tim, don't forget to look up Tim's nerdy YouTube channel, Hardware Unboxed, if you want any information about tech-related gear, tech gear-related stuff, talk, I don't know, whatever. You'd say it, Tim. What's your bloody YouTube channel about? Monitors and shit.
We cover PC hardware, gaming sort of stuff, that sort of thing. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the Crows.
I'm just giving you a plug
No one
because I
used to
know
watch
you've
my
only
channel.
got 950,000 bloody subs, so, you're struggling a bit. Mako, thanks again, as always. Good fun. Thanks to everyone on Discord who's joined in on the live chat. Awesome stuff. Have a good week, everyone, and we will see you next week at the same time.
Yeah, thanks, all. See ya.
Good night, all.